If you're looking for a fragrance that is unusual, unique, really creative, and on the daring side, I've got 7 great recommendations for you. Hey, what's going on YouTube? Raj here. Welcome back to the channel. So over the years, I've worn many fragrances, I've owned many fragrances that were very much on the daring side, or certainly very, very creative. And while I do own a lot of creative fragrances now, I don't have as many wild fragrances as I did in the past. But I know that there are a lot of you out there who still, who like that type of fragrance and want that type of scent in your collection. So I've gone through fragrances that I used to own and I've picked out 7 that I think are worth mentioning. The names of the fragrances and the timestamps are down below in the description. Let's just crack on and get started with this list. So the first fragrance to mention is from the brand Parfumeur, and this one is called Dzing. So Dzing is inspired by the scents of the circus, which is a really, really unusual theme for me, and one that I thought was really interesting when I found out about this fragrance. You've got the scent of leather, you've got this sweet musky vibe in there, there's a bit of caramel in this fragrance, a very earthy, very deep, musky, maybe slightly funky feel, and I think it's a really, really creative fragrance. And Parfumeur do a lot of sometimes unusual fragrances. This is probably one of those that is top of the pile when it comes to the most unusual. I don't find the sweetness in this one to be over the top. It never becomes sickly sweet, but there is a hint of vanilla and sweetness in there. I also get this dusty old books, kind of old library book kind of vibe, which is kind of unusual, and I liked it, but I wouldn't say I loved it. Overall, I admired this fragrance more from a creative standpoint rather than wearing it from a day-to-day perspective, but definitely worth checking out, especially if you're looking to get into more daring scents. So I've got quite a funny story to tell you about how I got this bottle. It was actually given to me by my dad. If you don't know, he has actually been on the channel a few times. I will leave a link in the section of this video on the top right hand corner, so click on that if you want to see him. So yeah, this is when I used to live with my parents, and he knew I was getting into fragrances, and he said to me, Raj, I've got this fragrance that I don't wear, maybe you'll be interested in it. And he went into his wardrobe and he pulled out a bottle of Parfumeur Dzing, and I said to him, you've had this fragrance just like lying around? And for me, I was starting to get into niche fragrances at that time, and he said, yeah, I just bought it off like eBay or something like that, and it didn't work out for him, so he gave it to me and I really enjoyed it. The next fragrance comes from Oman, and I'm talking about the house of Amouage, and specifically the Blue Beast Interlude Man. Whoa, this fragrance is wild. It is chaotic, but in an almost controlled way. There's so much going on in this fragrance, and it took me a little bit of time to figure out what was exactly going on. I find the opening to be a little bit harsh, but it does settle and become something that is quite magnificent, something quite opulent, very rich and spicy. There's a herbal quality coming from the oregano, a smokiness, a leatheriness, an oud accord that comes through. There is a lot going on in Amouage's Interlude Man. The performance is next level. I mean, we're talking 24 hours, projects a lot. So if you like that full-bodied, intense experience from a fragrance, Interlude Man is a great place to start. Moving on now to the next fragrance from the house of Arquiste, and this one is called Anima Dulcis. This fragrance for me, while it's not, I wouldn't describe it as daring, it's more on the unusual, unique side. And this for me was one of the first fragrances where I experienced a cocoa powder and chili combination. And maybe, you know what, to this date, it's the only fragrance that combines these two notes. It's based on an old drink recipe that I can't remember the exact story, but it's like some sort of ancient recipe or something along those lines that combines, you know, this milkiness, this warm milk with cocoa powder and chili. It's quite unusual and it's quite sweet and you know, a little bit gourmandish and woody. There's a spiciness coming also from the cinnamon, and this is a really, really interesting fragrance. I really recommend that you check it out. And the House of Arquiste makes some good stuff. In fact, I might have to sort of dive back into the house and see what they've currently got on offer, maybe get some samples or something along those lines. But yeah, if you've tried this fragrance, let me know your thoughts on it. Blind buying for me is something that has never really worked out, and I'm going to mention two fragrances that, even though they didn't work out for me, I certainly respect them in terms of compositions. And here on YouTube, they are really, really popular fragrances. The first one to mention from the house of Mugler, this one is Amen. A lot has been said about Amen and the whole line that it's spawned. The Pure series, Pure Malts and Pure Tonkas. It's quite incredible actually, because it's all based around this sort of patchouli oriental, slightly earthy vibe, but each fragrance, each flanker does its own thing. The main one, or the original, Amen, has this tar note which is quite overwhelming. I remember blind buying this and I wore this one to work, and I remember this so vividly. I remember doing not too many sprays, one specifically, one here, maybe I might have done a couple of sprays on the wrists, or I can't remember. All I do remember is going into work, and I soon realized that this was a mistake. It was not just a bit, it was too much to handle. I remember going to the bathroom a couple of times, trying to wash this off, you know, and it was just, oh my God, it wasn't coming off, and I found it just too overwhelming. Now, I may not exactly be selling this fragrance, but I'm here to tell you that just because I say I don't like a fragrance doesn't mean that you won't. Try it for yourself. This is a very creative scent. It packs a punch, and it's certainly for somebody who likes that bold, full-bodied, attention-grabbing fragrance. There's definitely a marketplace for it. Maybe you're the type of person who likes this type of scent. The next blind buy was from the brand Narciso Rodriguez. This is just called For Him. The Narciso Rodriguez line explores musk in quite an interesting way. This one is a floral, woody musk that kind of, to me, has a wet cardboard scent. Some people say it's a scent of like wet concrete, along those vibes. It's a really interesting composition. I think Narciso Rodriguez actually do make good fragrances, even if I'm not loving them from a sort of composition point of view. They are, I think, actually quite well made on the whole. This one just didn't work out for me. I found it quite off-putting, but you know, sometimes fragrances that are loved are often hated in equal measure. So, you know, a love or hate thing, kind of like a Marmite fragrance. This could work out for you. So, you know, as I've said, just because I'm not a fan, you might be. And so it is definitely worth checking out and definitely worth mentioning on this list. Frederic Malle is a great brand, and a lot of their fragrances are quite potent. One of them, which I can't remember if it was my first Malle, it's either between this one, which is Musc Ravageur, by the way, or Geranium Pour Monsieur. I can't remember which one was my full bottle. Sometimes I think it's one, sometimes I think it's the other. Musc Ravageur was a fragrance that I mentioned on a video that I did a long time ago, and it was called Top 10 Most Intense and Complex Fragrances. Again, I'll leave a link in the video. And Musc Ravageur made an appearance. This is spicy clove, sweet musks, powdery, sensual, carnal, furry. You know, it is a very interesting fragrance, and actually not really like a crazy wild scent. It's quite alluring and has a sensuality to it. But some people do find it a little bit too much. I actually really loved Musc Ravageur. And yeah, it's really one that opened my eyes up to what a fragrance actually can be when you give a perfumer like Maurice Roussel, who is the person who created this, you know, a freedom, almost like a carte blanche approach to create a fragrance. You know, this is what can be created. What I've actually heard with this fragrance is that Maurice Roussel had created this fragrance already, and he was trying to push it to lots of other brands. Nobody would accept it. He went to Frederic Malle and he said, look, I've got this fragrance. I think they tweaked it a little bit. I think that's how the story goes, and then finally sold it. And yeah, this was basically Guerlain's kind of not their own idea, or I'm not quite sure how to say it, but it's almost like Frederic Malle's version of Shalimar. That's what I've heard, something along those lines. Like, this is like Frederic Malle's Shalimar. You've got the sweet vanilla note in there, which adds a nice sweetness to the fragrance. And yeah, this fragrance is really worth checking out. The next fragrance to mention is a fragrance that is apparently worn by Ozzy Osbourne from the brand Czech Speake, which is a UK-based brand. This one is number 88. The bottle says it all, really. It is an all-black bottle, and it is described as a gothic type of scent. I think that might be taking it a little bit too far. It's certainly on the heavier side, but there is an exotic floral quality in this fragrance. There's a lot of tropical florals in this. There's a rose note that comes through quite prominently, but there is also a smoky incense vibe and a spiciness to this fragrance that makes it really unique. This is quite possibly one of the most unique fragrances I've tried. It's definitely quite unique within their Czech Speake line. They do a range of fragrances. They've got Oxford and Cambridge, which is a beautiful lavender-based fragrance. They have a neroli scent. They have a fragrance called Frankincense and Myrrh, which is this sweet, slightly resinous, ambery fragrance. And they have a vetiver-based one. So there's quite a lot in this line, actually. And Czech Speake doesn't really get much attention. Not quite sure why that is. Maybe to do with distribution. Maybe they're a little bit too under the radar. I'm not sure, but this one is probably the standout from the brand. Guys, let me know, what do you think about these fragrances? Which fragrances would make your list? Mention some down in the comments section. I appreciate you stopping by and checking out my content. Hit the like button and subscribe if you like this type of content. And I'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching. Take care. Bye.